Here comes another potential ace for the Detroit Tigers. His name is Jackson Jobe. Let's do a prospect profile. It's JJ Cooper and Jeff Pons from Baseball America. I'm Scotty Braun. Jackson Jobe is the number one pitching prospect according to the Baseball America rankings. Yes, number one in all of Major League Baseball, not just with the organization. So, JJ Cooper, I'm assuming that this is a player who has potential to be a number one starter in the big leagues if everything clicks the way it has in the minor leagues.
Absolutely. Now, the question is going to be the great thing is we'll see if the Tigers hold on to Tariq Skubal in the long term. But as long as they do, they'd probably be happy with Jackson Jobe being their number two. But that doesn't mean he's a number two if everything breaks. He still could be that number one, that front of the rotation ace that really teams dream of getting in the draft. Now, we always hear about how risky, how dangerous it is to take a high school arm, high school pitcher, high school right-hander in the first round, especially top of the first round. Jobe is an example that, it sometimes can also work out because that's how you get truly premium talent, truly premium arm talent, like what we saw with Hunter Green a few years before Jobe. And I think there are some similarities there because both these guys can really rear back and blow you away with velocity. But in Jobe's case also, he does know how to pitch as well. It's not just a great fastball. It's really, at times, it's 5 different quality pitches that can just kind of scramble a hitter's brain, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, and the stuff is absurd. You're talking about a 4-seam fastball here as a starter that's 96 to 97 miles per hour, sort of his 10th percentile fastball velocity is 95. He'll get it up to 100 miles an hour. I think he's been clocked as high as 99.7 this year. 90th percentile kind of sits 98. So, I mean, there's major smoke here with ride, with about 10 inches of run. It's above average in both of those areas. It's got great plane, so it's really hard for hitters to sort of get on plane with and elevate that pitch. He's got a really good slider. It's not as hard, but there's a ton of movement on it. I think it averages 16 to 18 inches of horizontal break with some drop as well. Then he's got a really good changeup where he's got great vertical separation off of his fastball. He's got really good velocity separation off his fastball. And then when you look at the performance, his top 3 pitches, every single one of those pitches has a swinging strike rate of 13% or higher. His changeup is actually almost a 20% swinging strike rate. Those are absurd numbers. He misses a ton of bats with everything that he throws. He consistently competes in the zone and throws strikes. He's got, 50% plus in zone rates. He's got, high strike rates on all 3 pitches. He's the kind of guy that can attack in the zone because the stuff is so good and just, challenge you to try to hit it. And he's also the kind of guy that, can work around the zone and get chases and get bad swings. I think he's kind of the total package. As long as he has the health and he's getting deep into starts, I mean, the sky's the limit here with Jobe.
It's hard for me to give you an example of a perfect comparison for him, but when you watch him pitch, he has so many quality pitches that sometimes it's easy to second guess when he does get hit because you're like, oh, why do you throw that pitch? It's like, then you remember, oh, because that pitch is really good. Like, you don't want him to fall in love with any one of them. Sometimes he can get a little cute with it because he has so many different pitches that he can use. But this is not just a guy who's going to rear back and try to blow you away. He's actually going to pitch. He's just going to pitch with a guy who can pitch and give you 98, 99 miles an hour pretty much whenever he needs it, and also has solid control to go with this extremely impressive array of pitches. I look at where the Tigers are right now, and bringing up Jobe is kind of, I would say, that the next step. To be honest, this is the guy that what we hoped Casey Mize would be. Now, I don't want to be ripping the Tigers on this because Tariq Skubal ended up being better than what was, that was a great draft find, great development success story. But if you said, what do you hope, if you're a Tigers fan, what do you hope to see from Jackson Jobe? Imagine what you were dreaming of with Casey Mize. This is the better version of that. It's a better pitcher, it's a more well-rounded repertoire. And I think at the end of the day, probably a little bit better control as well. You put it all together, Jeff, and this is just it. I don't want to get carried away here, but what could we be talking about? A lot of times high school pitchers, need that, what could we talk about 7 years from his draft? Because that's really usually the sweet spot. We're seeing that with Hunter Green in 2024, who, by the way, was a 17 draftee. So we've seen him kind of that seventh, eighth year for a high school pitcher. Still a few years away from Joe, but what could we be seeing at his peak? Are we talking about a guy who could win Cy Youngs?
I think so. I think you could be talking about a two-headed monster here early on, with one of the best left-handed pitchers in the game in Tarek Skubal, with one of the best young right-handers in the game in a guy like Jackson Jobe. And you brought up, you invoked the name Hunter Green. I think this guy's stuff is better. When you look at the type of pitcher that Jobe is, the fastball quality is better. I think the secondary quality is better. I think the strike throwing, the pitchability, the deception. Jobe has all that, I think, more so than Hunter Green has. And we're talking about one of the most talented high school pitchers that's come into the game over the last 10 years in Hunter Green. So I think we look at all that stuff, we take it up a level. There's really, when you start to look at what Jobe's ceiling is, I think you start to talk about Hall of Famers. You start to talk about guys like Roger Clemens, guys that have been, the best power right-handed pitchers in the game, and for a long period of time, that had multiple weapons in their arsenal, that dominated, even at a young age. And I think that's what we hope for with Jobe. And this is an exciting time for Tigers fans, because I think this is one of the best young arms that we've seen in quite a while.
If there's Tigers fans that are catching, wind of Jackson Jobe's potential for the first time to this degree, and obviously you guys are both very high on him, they're probably falling out of their chair, or if they're standing, they're jumping up and down. I mean, this is super high praise. It also makes you think that the success could come right away from him with the variance to the repertoire, right, and the deep arsenal that he has. And if you're a Tigers fan, it's been a disappointing season for the most part. You're thinking, can we win a World Series next year? Can we be a playoff team at least next year with a 1-2 punch like this? Why did our GM even take a phone call on Tarek Skubal if we were at this level with a guy like this? Obviously, it could take time. You could go through some growing pains. But I mean, JJ, we're talking about a farm system that sounds like it's in pretty good shape. A guy here who could be a Cy Young contender, who's already joining a Cy Young contender in a rotation. Things could look really bright for this team really quickly, even though it might come a year later than most anticipated. They're in the AL Central. AL Central much more competitive in 2024 than it was in 2023, but it's also an example of how you can jump very quickly in this division. You don't need to wait forever to get to a certain point to be competitive and, hang with the big boys like you do in the AL East if you're in that spot.
The one thing I'll say, I'm going to pump the brakes just a little bit with Jobe, just from the standpoint of, like, when we look at high school pitchers, these elite high school pitchers who reach the big leagues, a lot of times there is an adjustment period, right? We've seen the guys, again, we mentioned Hunter Green because Hunter Green's a perfect example. Blake Snell, who's, when we see these really good high school pitchers who turn into front of the rotation arms, there often is kind of an acclimation period to the big leagues, maybe even a little bit more so, understandably, than the college pitcher. Because when we see Paul Skeens reach the big leagues and immediately become one of the best pitchers of baseball, he kind of was doing this against very top level competition last year in the SEC in college baseball against metal bats. Like, when you see a guy like Jobe's been just simply better than anyone stepping into the box in pretty much every game he's had so far in the minors. The big leaguers, the hitters are all of a sudden a little bit better. They're going to give him, I think, I wouldn't be surprised if there are some rough moments with that, just from the standpoint of, like, hey, it's really tough making that jump to the big leagues, especially there's just no level of the minors that can equate to that. But that being said, there are also going to be these flashes. And yes, this is why we can really have some hope for the Tigers in 25, because this is a team that has these now kind of foundational building blocks, and also has a group of guys who now have been in the big leagues long enough, the Riley Greens, the Skubals, the Colt Keefes, even, to where this isn't a team that's just trying to find their feet anymore. Now they can have guys like Jobe, guys like, Cater Montero, who we've seen in the big leagues this year, guys like Kevin McGonigal and Max Clark, who are coming before too long, that there's really kind of a young homegrown core here that there hasn't been for a very long time.
Tons of potential here for the Tigers, especially if Jobe looks good in this first go round in 2024, what the Tigers could look like in 2025. That's it for this prospect profile. We do this when big prospects get called up. Make sure you're here on the Baseball America YouTube channel. And of course, check out everything going on with the website, with the newsletters. Go get yourself a Baseball America subscription, and we'll do this for the next one.